So today's video is, oh, big burp, good one. So today's video is going to be I can't say labor and delivery, but my delivery story, my C-section story, because you guys, most of you have seen the video, James GoPro'd the C-section, which if you haven't watched it, I will link that below. But I just wanted to talk about like how that all went, because obviously he ended up in the NICU and stuff like that, so I'm not going to go into the NICU video stuff yet, just because I'm doing a separate video about the whole NICU stay, and I'm actually going to be doing that with another vlogger, so you guys will have to wait for that. We're doing a little collab because her son was in the NICU as well. But okay, so let me start at the beginning. So I had a planned C-section for March 27th, Friday, March 27th, and I had to be at the hospital at 5:30 a.m. My mom and my dad and my two brothers and my brother's fiance all came into town so that they could be here for it. So well, my mom got here 2 days beforehand. Everybody else got here the day before, and we were just so excited, and it was just going to be amazing. Everything was going to be perfect. And so we got up early Friday morning, went into the hospital, we had everything ready to go, it was great. They had me get there a little bit earlier because I don't think my C-section was actually scheduled until 7:30 that morning. But I'm a really hard stick, especially when I'm dehydrated, because you can't eat or drink past midnight when you have a scheduled C-section. So I'm a really hard stick. It's hard to get an IV in me, so I came early just in case it took them a while, which luckily I told them ahead of time, and so the nurse took her time trying to find a good vein, and she got it the first time, which I think is honestly the first time that's ever happened, so I was very thankful for that. But anyway, okay, so my family, when we got there, my family went to the family waiting room, and James and I went to basically it was like the recovery room. So it was the room that after the C-section, that's where you end up in as well. So I can't remember all the details of that morning, but basically they prepped me, they got me in my gown. So yeah, it was pretty much, they prepped me and I just waited with James for a while. We were so excited. It was just, oh, it was so great. And the nurses who took care of me in the pre-op room, in the operation room, and afterwards were fantastic. Like, they were beyond amazing. But anyway, so then it was like 7:15-ish, and they wheeled me back to the operating room, and honestly, I was really freaked out about the spinal. They didn't do an epidural, they did a spinal block, which I have had before because I've had my hips replaced, but I've been asleep every time that I had gotten them, so I had never actually felt it. So I was so worried. I was like, oh man, it's gonna hurt so bad, and it's gonna be awful, and you know, I didn't know. So I was really worried about that, which, I mean, I've had so many surgeries, you wouldn't think that would faze me, but for some reason, just because I didn't know what it was gonna be like, terrified me. I wasn't afraid of anything else, just that. So we get back there. Well, I get back there. James had to wait until after they did the spinal to be able to come back. So they propped me up, they had me hold on to a pillow and hunch over, and they put a little numbing lidocaine type stuff in, and that just felt like a little tiny pinch, and then they said you're going to feel a little bit of pressure, and I felt a little bit of pressure, and then I felt my legs starting to get all tingly, and the next thing I know, they are dead legs, and I couldn't do anything, but it was a piece of cake. Bless you. Bless you. Literally a piece of cake. It was nothing, guys, so don't freak out about that, because nothing. Not a big deal. So then, once I was all numb and everything, they laid me out, and are you hungry? You just ate. You gonna suck on my thumb? Okay. So they laid me out, and they had James come in, and they tested the area to make sure that I was very good and numb. And they also had put in the catheter around that time, not that that's really that important, but it was good because they did it once I was numb, so I didn't feel it, so that was nice. So then James came in, and they tested the area to see if I was all numb and good, which I was, and I honestly, guys, didn't know that they had started the procedure. at all. I thought they were just like poking around on my belly, like feeling where he was, and I don't know, prepping the area, because you can still feel, you just can't feel like pain. It's more like pressure and movements, and I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of a funky feeling, but not pain. And so anyway, the only reason I knew that they had actually started is because there was the big light overhead, and it had a silver something to it that was kind of mirrored, and I was like, oh, because I thought I could see them doing things, and I was like, I looked over at James, I'm like, did they start yet? And he goes, he did not want to see us, guys, and oh, that's another reason I knew too, because he kept going like this. Like, he just kept looking out of the corner of his eyes, and I was like, what are you looking at, you weirdo? It was because they had started already, and then when I asked him, he's like, and then in the video, I don't know if you can hear it, but I was like, are you gonna throw up? There's a barf bag over here, because once I got the spinal block, I did get a little nauseous, and I told them that, so they put like a little thing to the side in case I got sick, but they gave me something right away to cut the nausea down, and it worked great. So that was, I guess, the only side effect, negative side effect, was that I did feel nauseous after getting the spinal. But anyway, he was okay. So the next thing I know, like, I can feel tugs and pulls, and then they said, you're gonna feel a bunch of pressure, because they were pushing down on the top of my belly to get him to come out, and I felt it, and that was a little uncomfortable just because it's like somebody smushing your rib cage, you know, and the top of your belly. And then the next thing I know, they're like, oh, look at all that hair, and I was like, oh my gosh, he has a lot of hair, you know, I'm just over here like freaking out. And of course you can't see him, which I really wish I could have watched the whole thing. I would have loved to watch the whole procedure, but unfortunately, I don't even know if they'd let me if I would have asked, but I didn't because James didn't want to see anything, so I didn't want to ask for like a clear curtain. But anyway, so then they you know, got the rest of him out, cut the cord, brought him over to show me, and of course I started tearing up because it was the most wonderful thing, and I heard him cry, and it was just wonderful to hear that, because everybody wants to hear their baby cry when they're born, because that makes you think everything's fine. And so it was such a happy moment. And then James went over with him while they took his APGAR scores and did his measurements and all that kind of stuff, and his APGAR scores were great at first, like amazing. He was doing fantastic, everything looked perfect, and then they were finishing up with me, like sewing everything up and doing that, and then James and him, as you probably saw in the other video, they went out, and my family got to see Jonathan, and then they went to the recovery room to wait for me. So, you know, they were just sewing me up, doing all that stuff, and then they wheeled me back towards the room, but as I was getting wheeled into the room, they were wheeling him out with James, and they said that he was grunting, and so they're like, this happens a lot with C-section babies because they don't get pushed out, they don't get that squeeze from a vaginal birth, so a lot of times they still have some extra fluid in their lungs. So they said that they see this all the time, that they're just gonna go, luckily I was at a hospital that had a NICU, they're like, we're just gonna go look at him real quick and get the fluid out, it's all good, no worries. So while they did that, James stayed with me because they needed to take him back to that area, and I guess he wasn't allowed at the time, I don't know. But anyway, so I was thinking everything was good, but I hadn't held him or anything because, like I said, as I was getting wheeled in, he was getting wheeled out. So the next thing I know, it's probably 20-something minutes later, and I'm talking with the nurse, and all of a sudden my phone rings, and I was like, well, that's really strange. So I handed it to James because I was in the middle of talking to the nurse, and so he answers it, and he all of a sudden I just see he gets this really strange look on his face, and I immediately knew something was wrong because it wasn't a good look. And he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. We haven't heard anything. So then I am like, what is going on? He's like, let me call you back. And so I was like, James, what is it? And he was like, they just called from Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and said that they're trying to arrange transportation for Jonathan. And nobody had come in and talked to us. We had no idea what was wrong because we live down in Columbus. So for him to be transferred to Atlanta when we were already at a hospital with a NICU, we knew that something had to be very wrong because they wouldn't normally do that. So we automatically just pretty much panic because why is our baby, bless you, why is our baby being transferred to Atlanta when there's a NICU here? And why did nobody talk to us about it? So my nurse runs out and she was like, let me go get your doctor. So she finds my doctor and he comes in right away and he was like, I don't have all the details. He was like, you know, this isn't my area of expertise. He's like, but the neonatal specialist is going to come in and talk to you. He has a hernia in his diaphragm. And he just kind of briefly explained it, but I didn't know what it was, and my emotions were going crazy, and it was just really confusing and scary. And the next thing I know, the neonatal specialist, probably 10 minutes later, wasn't that quickly, came in and he explained further that he had CDH and that he needed to go to Atlanta to have surgery, and that he was going to be transported very soon, so that they were getting him ready to transport him there. And basically he just asked if we had any questions, and honestly this is where it gets kind of blurry because it was just so scary, because I'm like, why? I thought everything was fine, we thought everything was perfect, how did we not know this? And the reason, because a lot of people have asked why they didn't know ahead of time that he had this, because most babies with CDH are diagnosed with an ultrasound, usually around 15 to 20 weeks. And you guys know I had tons of ultrasounds, but the reason his wasn't diagnosed is because although the hole was most likely there, it had to have been there because the diaphragm forms at the end of the first trimester, I believe. Nothing had come up into his chest cavity. None of his intestines or anything like that had come up into his chest cavity until the very end of my pregnancy, or maybe not even until the day I delivered him. And they can tell that because his lung was pretty much fully developed. So if it would have been sooner, for one thing, they would have caught it on ultrasound. Secondly, that lung wouldn't have been as developed. So that's why we didn't know. And my doctor even went back and looked at my anatomy scan and there was nothing on it. I went back myself, not that I didn't believe my doctor, but you know, I just wanted to see if I could see anything, and there was nothing there. He looked completely normal. That was hard, finding that out on the day he was born, because what's supposed to be the best day, the happiest day, turned very scary very quickly. And that's hard. That's something I'm still dealing with, because you know, you have this perfect plan of having your baby and all of these wonderful feelings, and then being at the hospital and learning how to breastfeed and your friends coming to visit, and just, it's this perfect plan, and it just went so differently, and it was so out of my control, and that was really hard because there was nothing I could do. So anyway, so they said that he would bring him by for me to see him real quick before they put him in the transportation thing up to Atlanta. So they come by and he's in this big transportation thing for babies, and you know, it was so hard to see him like that because they had paralyzed him. He was already intubated and stuff like that, and it was just really hard. I'll put a picture here of me. I got to touch him before he left, so I'll put a picture here. And then, so at that point, James had already decided he was going to go right up to Atlanta to be with him, and my oldest brother, Brandon, went up with James. Now, my mom, my dad, my other brother, and his fiance all stayed with me. So, James and Brandon left right away to be with him, and thank God my mom was there, because I don't know what I would have done without my mom. She was my rock, because James wasn't there, because he was with him. And I needed that so bad. So yeah, it was just really scary, but there was nothing I could do, and I had to stay at least the night So they let me stay in the recovery room for a while we got things kind of figured out and everything, and they came in with him. I got to touch him, then they had to leave really quickly, and they transported him in like a $10 million ambulance or something ridiculous that could support everything he needed on the way up there. And then after that, I went to the mother-baby floor to my room there, obviously by myself, and that's when I immediately asked for the pump and I started pumping. The rest, really, it's kind of blurry because I was just so focused on him that it's kind of like I don't even know what was going on in there. All I remember is the nurses were not that nice up there. The first one was, the other one's not so much. And they told me I could eat after 12 hours, and I was starving. And then one of the nurse that night was like, no, 24 hours. So I literally was about to eat my face off because I had not eaten since, you know, like 9 p.m. the day before. And yeah, so I just kept pumping, trying to get my milk to come in for him. And one thing that was really nice, our pastor's wife works at the hospital, so she kept coming in and visiting, and she was crying with me, so we were all crying, and it was emotional. But my brother and my dad, guys, oh my gosh, they went out and they printed, because they had taken a bunch of pictures when they saw him real quick when he was born, and they printed a bunch of pictures and framed them so that in the hospital room I could have a bunch of pictures of him. So that was really nice. And then that whole night I was just pumping and trying to, you know, get my pain under control, which at one point they didn't give me my strong pain medicine, but they said that they had later in the day, because when I asked for it, they said it had been administered to me, and I said no, it hadn't. And they said, well, in the system it says it was checked out. And I said, yeah, it says it was checked out, but was it given to me? Does it say it was administered? And they said no, and I said because it wasn't. And so they ended up having to call the nurse from the night before, and she was like, yeah, no, she didn't actually take it, but that took 2 hours, so by then I was in agony and crying pretty much. So that was rough, but it didn't really matter because I got out of the hospital like 3 hours later. And yeah, so my doctor had come in that morning and he was like, I know you want to get out of here and I know you want to go up to Atlanta. He was like, normally we don't discharge patients this quickly after a C-section, but he's like, you've had surgeries before, I know you know how to deal with recovery, and he was like, I trust that you're not going to push yourself too far. You're going to let people wheel you around with you in a wheelchair for the first couple days, and you're just going to take it easy, and he's like, just be careful, I will let you go. So I was discharged, and then I came home, and my mom and my brother and my dad and everybody, they helped me pack real quick, which, guys, I didn't know what I was doing. I was so not in the right mindset to be packing a bag, because for one thing, I didn't know how long I was going to be gone for. I didn't know how long we were going to be up there. I didn't know what clothes I could even fit into after I had him. So I literally just threw in like some sweatpants and t-shirts and pajama. No, I didn't even take pajama pants. Just like random stuff.